Okay, so I was assigned to do an episode. An episode is supposed to contain some form of polyphony in the texture. I composed using jazz harmonic language. Jazz tends to be rather homophonic with the usual one melody with accompaniment texture. So I tried to use some other elements reminiscent of old and new techniques of counterpoint based on extended chords and chromaticism. Some references to old techniques of counterpoint that I made include references to stretto imitation in bar 9 to 10, that there is use of delayed entries and imitation of the intervallic jumps from first voice by the clarinet imitated by the second voice played by the bassoon. And I actually just modified the rhythm and articulation in the bassoon part. So both of the rhythm and articulation in the clarinet and the bassoon part are reminiscent of jazz styles, with the syncopation in the bassoon using the staccato accent articulation, as well as the upward gliss in the B-flat clarinet part in bar 9. The entry in second voice by the bassoon in bar 9 is also syncopated. I delayed the bassoon entry by 1.5 beats to make it more jazz-like. Other old techniques of counterpoint include using contrapuntal texture, which means two melodies playing simultaneously, which was commonly used in the Baroque era. So for instance, Bach's three-part invention in F minor combines three independent melodies together to form a contrapuntal texture. So for example, in my piece, I used this technique in bar 11 to 16 in the clarinet and bassoon part. So what I did was that I broke up the melody introduced by the clarinet and rearranged the motifs in the bassoon part. The repeated motifs that I used included syncopated quaver motif, descending scalic figure, and the descending thirds. I used techniques such as inversion or the descending scalic line in bar 12 in the bassoon part. After rearranging and altering the motifs, it caused the bassoon and clarinet line to sound more like two different melodies in bar 11, so it ends up being more like a contrapuntal texture. And that's kind of why initially I said that this is only a vague reference to stretto imitation, because they are quite strict on the imitation of the first voice. But for mine, I only imitated the first two. It wasn't an exact imitation either. In addition to this, I also used contrapuntal texture in bar 16 to 19, in melody 1 in bassoon, and melody 2 in the piano right hand. One more reference to an old technique of counterpoint is the use of species, but a very loose reference to it. So the interaction between the B-flat clarinet and the bassoon, where the minim is against 4 quavers, is somewhat reminiscent of the third species, where the rhythmic ratio is 4:1 in bar 13. The piano crotchet walking bass on the left hand also has a similar effect whenever a minim or a dotted minim is being held, such as in bar 10 and 11. The ones in the melody by the clarinet and the bassoon, those would be more of second species because the ratio is 2:1 instead of 4:1. Okay, so I've also made some references to 20th century counterpoint. I used polyrhythms and cross rhythms. This can be seen in bar 20 to 21, where I stacked 3 different rhythmic tempos: fast, medium, and slow. The fast is semi-quavers by the clarinet, medium is the bassoon playing in crotchets, and the slowest one is the piano playing in minims and semi-brief. Although not done to the same extreme, I actually got some inspiration from Charles Ives' 3 Places in New England Movement 2, where he actually uses polyrhythms and also uses cross rhythms in his composition. The difference though is that the harmonies that I used are based on jazz harmonies rather than the 20th century harmonies that Ives would use. Another reference to 20th century counterpoint was the use of layering of textures. The layering of textures can be seen in bar 9 to 16. Layer 1 is the piano accompaniment, which is typical of a jazz style, in which the right hand plays the syncopated chords and the left hand plays the walking bass. The second layer is the contrapuntal layer, in which the bassoon and the clarinet are playing 2 different melodies simultaneously. Layering of textures, I believe, was also used by Charles Ives in his work 3 Places in New England. So that is also where I got the idea of layering different textures together. Yeah, and that's it for my presentation. Thank you.